Hey guys, so this is What If Deku Was Batman Part 2. Now guys, I last left off telling you guys that this was going to be a strictly Vigilante episode, and I'm going to be a Vigilante series. My very first strictly just, straight off Vigilante series. Now basically guys, I just got done recording What If Deku Was Shang-Chi, and pretty much I'm just getting on this What If since someone asked, please Part 2, and please is a magic word. And I, well, appreciate his politeness. So let's just get into it. Now, guys, basically, I last left off pretty much introducing Selena Kyle, or our version, or pretty much this version, Selena Kyle, aka being replaced with Momoya Rozu, and pretty much this Deku would have been similar to Batman Beyond Deku, just way more spider, and this version's Bruce Wayne. Basically, the person that's going to be mentoring Deku isn't going to be mentored by anybody, but Deku will come across different heroes, and also different heroes similar to DC heroes, or this version's of DC, the universe's version of DC heroes, and will come across other children, and eventually by the end of the series, when most of you graduates, Deku will become a vigilante, will be pardoned by somebody in the future, and eventually, just saying, near the end of the series, he will eventually take out a protege. This being, well, this universe is Robin, but for now, this is gonna be a strictly Deku What If. Now, basically, guys, pretty much this is gonna be a strictly vigilante episode. So every episode is mainly freestyled and based off heroes, or based off Batman villains. Now, guys, pretty much I picked Deku up against Killer Croc. I picked Deku up against the Riddler, and for now, I'm gonna pick Deku up against Penguin, Clayface, and Killer Croc again for this episode. So let's get into it, guys. We start our episode with Deku being in the Batcave after he, had a little bit of a entanglement with this version of Selena Kyle, or Momo, aka Black, aka Catwoman. Basically, he would have been met back at the Batcave, him patching up most of his attacks or wounds he got from Killer Croc, him just looking at them. Basically, him not patching them up, him just looking at the wounds. But basically, he would have gone ready to get back on the streets after a little bit of a, housing party, doing some just billionaire playboy stuff. That night, after everybody left the mansion, after, Alfred would have cleaned everything up, Alfred would have escorted Deku out of the house, him getting ready for another night of vigilante. He would have, not used the bat bike, and would have just, gone for foot and basically just gliding around Gotham City. He would eventually come across some sort of containment compartment, basically transferring some sort of drug. Basically, he would have interrupted this, taking down all the thugs pretty quickly, Batman style, and eventually would have seen a very chubby type man. Basically, pretty much this man looking towards Deku in the shadows, him seeing Deku's glowing eyes, and a little bit of a shimmer of his red bat logo, and would have led to him, it's Batman, basically him pointing, and three other men, very buff man with some sort of highly advanced type technology, like future like guns, very compact and very big looking dangerous guns, would have been shooting towards Deku, and these guns would have been shooting straight towards would have been literally working like grenade launchers, basically them going through whole trucks, cars, and containment apartments, and also, pretty much, buildings nearby, even taking down a whole dock ship nearby. Basically, Deku would have seen that the destruction the guns are every shot was doing, and he would eventually step in, drop kicking one of the guys into the water. Basically, the gun short circuit. He would have noticed this and would have grabbed a nearby bucket and would have been a little bit more resourceful, throwing it on the guy's guns and taking them all out very swiftly. And eventually, the last one, he would just kick him in the nuts, and that guy would just fall down to the ground, wailing. He would have looked at Penguin and would have grabbed him by the throat and said, "I heard about you. Your underground business." He would have interrogated Penguin for the time he had, since the commotion of the guns caused the police and some heroes to show up. Basically, he would have told Penguin that, "I'm coming after you, and you will never be safe in Gotham again." Him disappearing into the night. Basically, Penguin being shocked at how the Batman was a little bit more, well, scary. Imagine Bruce Wayne in the Batman Beyond suit, but a little bit more, well, brutal. But basically, Deku isn't brutal, he's just Batman. But basically, after that, Deku would go across Gotham watching the police handle Penguin and also the shipment of drugs. And Penguin would have been in jail for a couple hours until he would just be let out. Because he was, part of the underground. And he had people in high places that were friends and the police. Basically, them being dirty cops that would be able to get rid of the evidence against Penguin. Commissioner Gordon in this universe's Commissioner Gordon would have been shocked because the proof that they had against Penguin to pin him up in jail for the rest of his life was just gone. And also the video surveillance near the docks was just gone as well. Now basically, we were seeing that Deku would have noticed that Penguin wasn't in jail when he just walked scot free. He would have left it there, basically him trying to get back on that. But he would have heard there was commotion on his display, or Alfred telling or notifying Deku that it was another type of another type of disturbance near Gotham Park. Basically, he would have glided there, and he would come across some sort of monster jogging across the park, trying to get to a getaway car. He would have jumped in front of it, saying, "You're not going anywhere." Him analyzing it, him saying that as some sort of clay. Basically, the monster would have hit towards Deku, and Deku would have dodged most of the attacks. But eventually, he would get hit by one of the attacks, him being pitied or very much stack on, plastered to a nearby tree in the park by Clay. Him basically looking around, and pretty much, well, Clayface getting away scot free. Basically, we see that this version of Clayface would be similar to Clayface from the 2003 Batman movie, 2003 Batman TV show, or the Batman TV show. Basically, that version of Clayface. He would have been a good guy, but he would be blackmailed by a bunch of thugs and people in the underground, basically them trying to take advantage of Clayface's abilities. Basically, what happened is pretty much, Deku would have used most of his abilities, most of them, to try. He would use most of his abilities, most of his skills, to try to track down Clayface. He would have found him down in a very deep trench in Gotham. Basically, the thugs counting the money that Clayface took from a nearby bank near Gotham Park. Basically, pretty much Deku would have seen this and would have tried to get in. He would sneakily pretty much crept into the thugs building near the docks, and deep in the docks, like in a trench. Basically, him looking around. Basically, he would have been looking around, and basically he would have been going around. He would have taken down most of the thugs one by one in the shadows, grabbing one, pretty much choking it out, grabbing another one, just throwing him by the feet, making his head hit the ground first before he could say anything, knocking him out. The other thug, he would have just hit him with a tranquilizer dart from one of the gauntlets, or one of the compartments on the tech suit that was very sneakingly hid, that couldn't be detected by a pat down or whatever. Deku would have also found himself behind another thug, the leader of it, and he would have been a little bit more trained than others. Him eventually sensing Deku and throwing a shuriken towards him. Deku would be completely confused and like, a shuriken? Why would a street thug that robbed a bank with a monster or a court person try to, use a shuriken? The guy would have looked at him and said the plan worked. Basically, him throwing some sort of technology on mobilizing Clayface. He would have looked at Deku and basically would have said, "I found you at last. Horatio goes looking for you." Deku would have heard that name immediately and would have charged straight towards the street thug. They would have duked it out for a good 5 minutes until the street thug would have been able to trip Deku and make him fall. But Deku would have fell to the ground and would have flipped right back on his feet, him using smoke bombs to get away. But he would have made the assassin think he walked away. The assassin would have, with the Clayface, was about to activate something to kill him. Deku wasn't gonna let this happen or let it slide, so Deku ran right towards there, basically tackling down the assassin into a nearby containment ship or into a nearby crate, cracking the assassin's back, making him paralyzed. Deku would have noticed this at the time, and the assassin would just, at his perspective, would have been knocked out. But the assassin just being knocked out, basically by the pain of his spine just being cracked, or the lower back of his spine being cracked because Deku shoved him hard, hard in that containment ship. Basically, Deku would have looked around, and basically would have looked at, would have looked at Clayface. He would have called the police, and the police would have arrested Clayface. And this version of Clayface would have been, a modified quirkless person that was given Clayface abilities. So yeah. So basically, pretty much this version of Clayface would have been kind of just a side character, not really a big runner-up. But let's switch on to a more interesting part of the story. Bane. So Bane, aka I don't know Bane's real name, but basically Bane. Bane will be the next part and probably one of the most occurring villains in the next parts. Now basically the main occurring villains in this parts are gonna be, Bane, and I'm gonna be starting off with the more minor, not the most more minor Batman villains, and then later on I'll be going into depth of, side characters and, just random Batman villains later on in the series, or later on in the What If and parts I'm making. But basically, also, the Joker, I will introduce him in part 3. And part 3 is going to be filled with just a bunch of stuff about, let's say, tops. I'm not really gonna name a number, but a lot of villains are gonna be introduced. Most of them might have a short role as like an obstacle, not a real villain or a real big baddie for Batman or Deku. But basically, let's get into it. Bane. Basically, we start our story off with Deku the next night of Vigilante. Basically, him getting ready to go out. Now, basically, at this time he wouldn't know about what he did to the assassin, because the assassin would have been able to flee away by using his upper body to crawl himself back to a type of portable pool that he brought with him, that Ra's al Ghul landed him. He would rush into the waters, and I'm gonna leave off the assassin there. And basically, we see that Deku would have been very, very much, basically, going to investigating on why Ra's al Ghul sent an assassin after him. But before he can do that, we see that he would find out about a bombing. Basically, Deku would have pretty much investigated it being about afternoon, like it was right when the sun was setting. Basically, pretty much Deku would have gone to investigate. Basically, him investigating the bombing before the police could show up. He would have seen that the bombing was rigged and it was way more sophisticated, and the bomb they were using is high tech. He would have looked at it more closer. Him ruling out other villains that he fought that used bombs, like the Riddler. Basically, him just trying to, investigate who could possibly want to bomb up a bank without taking any money. Basically, him looking that all the money in the bank was all scorched and burned. And before that, it was no robbery on the surveillance cameras, because the surveillance cameras were all live internet. They could be transferred to any other server. And Deku used most of his intelligence and his money to get all the security footage in all of Gotham wirelessly connected to the back computer and to his mobile headset and his mask. Basically, we see that Deku would have seen the footage. Basically, him seeing that a masked man with a coat basically ran up in there and chucked the duffel bag in the middle of the bank and sprinted out with a bunch of men that were keeping the police occupied. When the bomb went on, the men that were behind died for this man. The man got away through Gotham, pretty much surveillance cameras, and just got to a dead zone in Gotham that didn't have any cameras. A dead zone in Gotham that mainly didn't have much of anything, not even police. But well, the trenches, or the more crime felt part of Gotham. Because Gotham's all crime felt all around, but in this part of town, in this part of the city, let's just say crime was so bad that police and heroes feared for their lives every second they walked out of their door. Getting mail, even owning a business, would be completely terrifying. You never knew who would run up in there and rob you. And half of the time when they get the money, they just kill you. So the crime in this part of the city was completely and utterly insane. But for the time being, basically we see that Deku would have been Deku would have woke Deku would have well the next night Deku would have investigated more into the situation. The next night he would have heard about the USJ attack, but he wouldn't really care that much. Now basically he would hear about the USJ attack and he would hear about Mama Rozu being a part of it. Deku would just scoff it off, and that night Deku would go on patrol. He would be gliding to building, jumping to building, kind of like Spider-Man. Him not swinging but jumping to building, kind of like Spider-Man, acrobatically and gracefully flipping up in the air. Basically, he would have been jumping to building, eventually coming across a type of warehouse. A warehouse that was nonchalant but had some energy readings in it of high tech, and also some sort of drug that most militaries were well investigated in. Deku would have investigated it and would have made a small hole on the used his claws to make a small hole on the window of the pretty much abandoned warehouse, and would have pretty much squeezed his body through the hole. Basically, he would have looked around and he would have seen that it was much of nothing. He would see that it was tons of crates after he looked around for a second and basically saw that a man in a type of Hispanic wrestler mask was basically taking this drug and filling it to the brim before it can even fill into a duffel bag. He would took as much as he could hold in the duffel bag and told the rest of the thugs or goons to pick it up and move it to the shipment, move it to the base. Basically, the man running off, putting it in the trucks in the back. Deku would have scanned the trucks and would have sneaked out of the building, and basically, pretty much, he wouldn't be completely out of the building, but he would poke his upper half out of the building because they would be behind the building, and he would use a little bit of his boomerang or ricochet moves to basically ricochet two technology disabled batarangs, basically disabling the trucks. Basically, he would look behind himself and he would see that Bane or this man has spotted him, looking dead right at him in the shadows. Deku would have turned on his LEDs and his light in his eyes, and basically would have ran and just gone into the shadows. Bane would have been looking around and him sensing, and out of nowhere, Batman or Deku would have kicked towards Bane. Bane would have dodged it, grabbing Deku and chucking him into a container ship, basically almost causing like permanent pain. Deku at this point wouldn't know it, but he would have huge bruises on his back already by just a throw. Deku would have gotten back up, him knowing that his suit was durable enough, so pretty much Deku just got back up, minimal damage or pain. Basically, Deku would have ran right towards their Bane, and they would have started to exchange punches, kicks, throws, lunges, and just all sorts of, very nasty, gnarly hits. Deku kicking Bane in the shins, stabbing him in the legs, and Deku being thrown around like a rag doll. Bane eventually would have been... So basically, what would happen afterwards, after pretty much Deku started to exchange more blows and punches and stab wounds. Basically, eventually Deku would have started to overpower Bane. Bane would have been overpowered. In the last second, Bane would have. So basically, Deku would have seen that Bane would have pressed something on his wrist. Basically, press something on his wrist. Basically, injecting some sort of green serum or liquid through the tubes that are on the back of his mask, leading behind his coat into his mask. Bane would have pumped himself with the serum or the toxin, and basically would have looked at Deku and would have, smirked underneath the mask. He would have grabbed Deku by the shoulders and would have crushed his shoulders as hard as he could. Deku's shoulders wouldn't be completely shattered because, the suit had durability, and basically Deku was thrown against the container ship again, throwing him right through it, like, Superman did Zod in Man of Steel. Basically, Deku would have gotten back up, him coughing up some blood through the mask. Basically, he would have looked at Bane. Bane would have grabbed a nearby crowbar and would have hit it as hard as he could towards Deku's face. The crowbar would have broke, but Deku would have been sent flying on the other side of the warehouse, through a wall. Deku would have gotten back up, and he would have been kicked into the dock's water, basically him getting back up. Bane would have jumped into the water, grabbing Deku, and started to drown him. And they were on the kind of a muddy part, so it was like 6 feet of water before they would have to move out 6 feet to the left to actually get into the deep area of the dock. But basically, Deku would have started to be drowned. Deku would have, pretty much started his backup system for drowning and extra air supply in his suit, and then he would fall back and stab Bane right in the legs with his gauntlets or with his spikes on his wrist. Basically, he would have fleed off and he would have stabbed a electro batarang in Bane's back, stabbing it right into his back, almost hitting a vital organ, electrocuting Bane. Bane would have overpowered this pain and would have grabbed Deku and would have chucked him nearby a nearby truck, making him fall on top of the truck. He would have gotten back up in pain, and Bane would have grabbed him and would have grabbed Deku by the leg and the arm and went for a finishing back blow. Basically, him grabbing Deku and slamming him on his knee. Deku would have felt the pain shock through his body, and he would have been thrown down to the ground. Deku's back wouldn't be broken since the durability capabilities of the suit. Basically, Bane just having a shattered kneecap. Basically, Bane would have limped off, telling his men to go. Him getting in his own car, a black Lamborghini or a black very sportsy car that was pitch black that would blend into the darkness, and pretty much he would have drove off. Deku would have gotten back up, basically him coughing up blood through the suit, and a bunch of pro heroes and pretty much cops would have shown up because the commotion of Deku being thrown through a wall, and also pretty much the pain of Bane yelling out in pain when he was electrocuted by a batarang. Pretty much Deku would have gotten back up and would have limped away into the water, him swimming as hard as he could towards a nearby other dock that was closer to Wayne Manor. He would have been crawling as much as he could, basically him activating the beacon mode on his suit. Alfred would have picked him up, basically taking him back to Wayne Manor and treating his wounds there. Deku would have been, treating his wounds, and Deku would have gone into a kind of coma for about 2 weeks. During these 2 weeks, most of the hero exams and blah blah blah, and also the sports festival would have passed, and eventually the Nomu attack would have happened. Now off from Bane. Pretty much doing the Nomu attack, doing the provisional license exam, pretty much, the provisional license exam would have got some of the same. The attack on the city would have reached news to Gotham, and basically Deku would have, investigated this, seeing that it was near Gotham, and it could eventually lead up and move to Gotham. Eventually, it did, and Anomu would start causing havoc near the beginning of the town of Gotham the main entrance to Gotham. Pretty much, Deku would have intervened and would have tried to go up against Anomu, with its injuries still, kind of, painful, but he would have been overpowered with this. Pretty much, he would start to go up against the Anomu as hard as he could, him making a tendency plan for All Might, him using it on the Nomu. He would have thrown a artificial type of gravity, basically using the gravity to overpower the Nomu and making the Nomu lose all boundaries or just lose all strength, basically making the Nomu collapse and be stuck to the ground, not being able to move and being immobilized. Deku would have ran off, basically him running off and pretty much him going into the city. When he was going into the city, he would have been running around, basically going up against other Nomus and throwing shurikens at other Nomus. Eventually, he would come across Stain attacking Ida. Since Deku wouldn't be in UA, Momo would have been there. Not Momo. Momo wouldn't be there. But basically, you see that when pretty much, Ida was about to get stabbed, Deku would have shown up right in time where his cannon self would. Basically, him jumping in, grabbing the sword, and snatching it out of Stain's hand, kicking Stain into a nearby trash can in the alleyway. Stain would have gotten back up, him taking another blade, him saying, "Feisty, huh? I've heard about you. You're the Batman in Gotham City." Basically, Deku would have looked at him, not saying a word, him throwing his sword away, basically saying, "Yeah, I'm the Batman. Who are you? I've heard about you, but I don't know your name." And basically, him just playing coy with Stain so he can hear what Stain calls himself. Stain says, "I'm Stain, the hero killer." I pretty much him giving off his whole, mentality about how I kill the bad heroes that are in it for fame, but you aren't. You're a vigilante. You save people without getting paid. You just do it for the people. Deku knows this is true, but doesn't really want to admit it to, a murderer. It doesn't matter what type of people you kill, you're still killing people that have families. Deku said. Pretty much, Stain would have looked at him and said, "Families, doesn't matter. It's overrated." Basically, he would have looked at Deku and would have said, "You're pathetic. You're just pathetic. You really want to go up against somebody that is just like you." Deku is shocked and says, "You're nothing like me. You're a murderer." Basically, he would have said, "I'm not a murderer." And Deku would have said, "Yeah, you're a villain." He would have gotten into a fighting stance with Stain, and Deku would have started to battle it out. Deku and Stain would have started to battle it out, throwing fist after fist, throwing punch after punch. Deku would have grabbed Stain by the arm and basically would have chucked him into a wall in the alleyway. He would have started to pummel down on Stain, but Stain would have tried to cut or stab through Deku's suit. He would have said he can't really cut through the suit since his weight is made out of a very durable fabric, plus, yeah, he just can't cut through Deku's suit, so he was kind of, useless, because he can't really cut through Deku's suit or stab him. So pretty much Deku just, beat the soul out of Stain. Stain's ribs were cracked, his jaw was almost dislocated, and he had a crack on the bottom or the back of his skull. Basically, him being in kind of a coma-like state. Now, Deku would have gotten off, and basically he would have injected Stain with a type of serum that would enhance his healing, but still keep him in a coma-like state. Basically, getting rid of Stain's broken ribs and cracked skull and dislocated jaw, but still having the pain there, and still having the effects of being almost beaten halfway to death still there. He wouldn't be injured, but he would still have the pain and the bruising on his tissue, but not the cracks on his bones. So yeah. So basically, Deku would have ran off, or would have, disappeared into the shadows with Ida looking at him, and Ida finding him as not a vigilante, but a hero. Him being all shook, but he was still admire Deku since Deku saved his life. He didn't see him as a vigilante, he saw him as a hero, a savior. Deku would have, well, gone into the shadows, and Ito would have told his experience to the people at school. And most of Class 1A would have been on Batman's side even before that. Pretty much Class 1A and UA would have been debating about the Batman, and if he's a good vigilante or whatnot. The government or the police pretty much would have said that, Batman's a vigilante. He cannot be just given a free pass, a slap on the wrist. He can't become a hero now. He will in the future, just for, debating's sake, but I'm not going to tell you how, because you gotta watch the series for that. But yeah, they're basically, pretty much after that, a little bit of UA starts talking more about Batman, and some of UA students kind of plan on going to Gotham as a vacation in hopes of finding Batman, or some of them plan on being district or being a hero strictly in Gotham so they can come across Batman and whatnot. Basically, we see that Deku seeing the news about Batman taking down Stain, the hero killer. Basically, most of the people of Gotham, Japan, and just people all around the world are saying that Batman's a hero. Batman's a hero. Some people say Batman's a vigilante and he should be taken down. Blah blah blah. Debating, but 50% or mainly 80% of the population of Japan and Gotham combined basically think Batman's a hero, because Batman saved a lot of people in Gotham. Deku starts to looks more into the trenches, because the trenches are, let's just say, they're a lot more, bad than the other parts of Gotham. The other parts of Gotham are bad, but he says he needs to focus on every part of Gotham. Deku starts to look on different, different frames, different angles, and tries to look on every single thing that happens in Gotham. He had heard about some sort of vigilante taking down some thugs nearby. Basically, he would have investigated this, and he would have came across, a guy in some sort of green suit with a bow and arrow. He would have been shooting down the thugs pretty quickly, taking them out pretty swiftly, without any minimal damage. One of them would be stuck in some sort of hardened foam, and another one of them would be constantly electrocuted by some sort of arrow attached to their chest. Another one would have been hanging upside down by a rope attached to an arrow attached to the ceiling. Deku would have analyzed this and would have said that this guy is highly skilled. Maybe a assassin from Racial goal. He would have noticed that, he didn't really sound like an assassin, and also, I'm pretty sure he never saw somebody with blonde hair wearing a green spandex suit with with pirate boots and a quilt and a green bow and arrow. Basically, he would have confronted this man. This man, if you haven't noticed it, is Green Arrow. Green Arrow would have looked at Deku and said, "Hey, I'm new to Gotham, but I'm just tracking out a villain that I saw coming down to Gotham." Sorry guys, I got interrupted. But basically what would happen is he would have said that Green Arrow would have said that he was tracking down some villains that came to Gotham. Basically him trying to take them out while they're in Gotham, trying to, retreat. Basically, Deku would have said, Gotham is my city. Doesn't matter if it's on the docks, doesn't matter if it's on the edges, it's still my city and I protect it. Basically him saying, I'll catch your villain and I'll bring to the police. Basically, Green Arrow would have said, I'm not gonna let you just take in my villain. Basically, he would have looked at Deku and they would have shared kind of a glimpse towards each other. Deku's standing like this with the two, pretty much batarangs in his hands, and Deku would have looked at Green Arrow and would have said, fine. And basically that's where I'm gonna leave it off here, guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. As always, guys, have a blessed day. Before I go, basically, guys, just want to tell you guys that this series, I'm playing a lot for this series. A big final showdown in part 10, and just a big finishing, ending in at least part 15 or part 12. A big ending that's gonna give questions to most of everything that's happening. Now, in part 3, I will be ending off with Green Arrow and Deku, joining sides to take down his villain. Now, guys, if you have any ideas on what type of villain Green Arrow should be going after in Gotham City with Batman, just go down in the comments and tell me. And also, three questions I wanted to ask you guys. The ship, no, not the ship. That was for my Shang-Chi what if. I was asking if you can give me a ship for that. But the ship is already, Momo and Deku. Or, like, Momo's Catwoman and Deku's Batman. Basically, guys, just go in the comments. What type of villain should Green Arrow be tracking down for Batman to take care of? So they will be working together and join alliances for the first half of the video. The middle half of the video is going to be about Deku finally meeting Joker and making Joker, as in coming across Red Hood. And for the last bit, or the ending of part 3, it'll be about, just Deku and Momo and their relationship. So yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. And as always, guys, have a blessed day and have a good night. See you guys later. Bye.